The Blaze Alexander Kade Strowd trade seemingly has confused both Diamondbacks and Orioles fans. So we'll try to make sense of all of it coming up on this crossover episode of Locked On Orioles and Locked On Diamondbacks.
You are Locked On MLB Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles and Diamondbacks fans. It is time for a Locked On MLB crossover here. I am Connor Newcomb, host of the Locked On Orioles podcast. And today, well, Daynen Biggs is here with us. We're doing a little crossover from the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And Daynen and I reached out because we had a trade that went down between these two teams. Certainly not the biggest or most momentous trade of the MLB offseason, but I think we'll have a chance to break down at least an interesting deal, I would think both sides would say.
Oh, I think so. And I mean, honestly, if you've been following the Diamondbacks postseason at all, might be the most interesting move for the Diamondbacks this offseason. Definitely the biggest reaction for me when I was at work talking with clients and people and stuff, and I'm in this big meeting and I get a notification on my phone. And honestly, Blaze Alexander was kind of the last person I expected to see get traded away, not because it didn't make sense. In retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, he probably was on the trading block for most of the offseason. I just didn't think of it. There were so many other names that were being thrown around that by the time we get to Blaze Alexander, I was like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. But the more I look into it and the more time that passes, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's starting to make more and more sense, the trade. I think initially, at least Arizona's reaction was, why the heck would we trade him away? He's like one of the most exciting players we have on the team. He's young. We have control of him for a long time. Why are we getting rid of him? And the more we kind of stew on that, I think the more we're like, oh, okay, it kind of actually makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, the trade has made more sense from the Orioles side as well as time has gone on. I definitely had a kind of a visceral reaction to a trade that, shouldn't take that much of a reaction, but I was just so shocked by the deal that they made. Again, not that it was a number one starting pitcher for a number one bat. It was a middle reliever for a utility player, but it has some other implications that we'll get to. I wanted to let you kind of really kick us off to talk about Blaze Alexander because I think he's known to Diamondbacks fans. This is a guy who debuted in 2024. It's not like he's played 162 games each of the last 2 years, but I know down the stretch last year, he was almost an everyday player and they know who he is and he's had some cool moments, but he was never like a top prospect. So I don't think Orioles fans quite know a lot about him because he was never on the national radar. And even when he's been in the bigs the last 2 years, the O's don't see the Diamondbacks a lot. He wasn't on the D-backs team that played in the World Series in 2023, so you don't really get to see him from that stance. So the Orioles are getting this guy now at age 26 with a ton of team control. At this point in his career, as a hitter, as a fielder, who is Blaze Alexander at this point?
Great question. So I took over this show, Locked On Diamondbacks, right at the end of the last season. And so I'm still fairly new to the Locked On network. But as soon as I came in, I immediately identified Blaze Alexander as like one of my favorite players to watch. And I think most Arizona fans would agree with me on that. He is electric. He is so fun. The Diamondbacks do best, as well as most teams, but the Diamondbacks do best when they're causing chaos and chaos on the base paths. That's one of the favorite things that the Diamondbacks like to brag about. And Blaze Alexander is the kind of guy who hits a single, he steals second, steals third. He's smiling at the dugout. He's getting energetic. He's bringing everybody around him up. Everybody loves to see and to watch Blaze Alexander play. It was super fun. And when he first came in to this season, he was hitting like crazy, doing really good stuff. His defense has improved dramatically since 2024. He came in a little rough in 2024, but 2025, he is a black hole at third. He's a black hole in left when he plays left field, which he only played a few times, but he has some MLB highlight worthy plays in left. Super exciting to watch. The one thing that we saw that kind of something to be cautious about. I know all of the Orioles coaching staff is watching this, obviously, all the hitting coaches and everything. So I'll just let them know that Blaze Alexander does really, really well until there was, I don't know if the book got out on him or something, but pitchers realized that if they throw off-speed pitches at him, he'll swing every single time. And it could be in the dirt and he'll swing no matter what. And so I think pitchers figured that out on him. And the last couple months, or the last month or so of the season, he really slowed down and showed some signs. He came back down to earth, really, is what it was. And undoubtedly, he's working on that this offseason. And especially depending on how much playing time he gets in Baltimore, he's going to overcome that and he's going to become a really good player. And Arizona fans were banking on that happening, and which is why I think it kind of hurt to see him go. But defensively, he's going to be so much fun, and he's going to maybe not be a player that the Major League Baseball and all the news outlets are going to go, oh, Blaze Alexander, there he is, always showing up. But in Baltimore, he's going to be a fan favorite, guaranteed, and he's gonna be very welcome there.
Yeah, the big thing I think Orioles fans noticed at first when you're just scouting the stat line on Blaze is, by the end of last year, I think he was a solid offensive player. He ended up about league average, but it came with a 32% strikeout rate, which is, when you're over 30%, you really got to do some other things really well to be a successful hitter. And kudos to him for being league average overall with a 32% strikeout rate. Now, you kind of look at his splits, and I know he was like amazing in his first month in 2024. I know he was like amazing in August of this year. And you look at those months, and he was still running strikeout rates, especially this year, like over 30%. So he can still be successful. I think there's so many hitters like that in today's Major League Baseball that there's probably not like one secret sauce Blaze Alexander is doing. It's more like coaches know how to coach guys enough that when they swing and miss a lot, and that makes sense. You talked about just chasing after breaking balls. That's probably why a guy runs a strikeout rate over 30%.
Yeah.
I think as an offensive player, Orioles fans know a lot of guys like this. They just had Ramon Arias for the past 6 years. Very similar utility infield type, solid bat, strikes out some, plays good defense. I think a question for the O's, because when you go after a utility guy, right? A lot of utility guys are prospects who were supposed to be shortstops and they didn't hit enough, so they had to go to the bench. Or they're veterans who get signed to a cheap one-year deal. You don't see teams giving up 3 players in a trade for a utility man a lot. And what I think Orioles fans want to know is, Blaze came up as a shortstop, and he played a ton of shortstop. And as you mentioned, it didn't really go well. And then this year, he moved out to the outfield and even played center field. So I think my question would be, if you're a utility guy and you can play center field and shortstop, that puts you on another level. So I know he didn't play a lot of shortstop in 2025. Where would you kind of grade out his shortstop defense? And then in that very, very little time he played in center field, is that a position you think he could at least once a week maybe stick out there at?
Oh, you could have him play shortstop on Monday, left field Tuesday, center field Wednesday, and then third base on Thursday. Heck, he could probably catch for you if he needed to. It seems like wherever you put Blaze Alexander, he excels, and he does so good defensively that you're like, this guy is a born left fielder, right? And you're like, no, actually, he's a shortstop. And you're like, oh, I wouldn't have guessed that. He looks amazing out there. And so wherever the Orioles need somebody, they can put Blaze Alexander, and he's going to fill that role excellently, at least defensively. Offensively, again, like I mentioned, I think he does need a little bit more work. Maybe he needs a little bit more maturing as far as plate discipline and pitch selection, but that stuff comes with time. I'm not worried about his long-term ability to hit, but defensively, yeah, he's got something special for sure.
And I think the one other thing is, where was he going to fit in had this trade not been made? Because I think the Orioles fan perspective is, this is a utility guy, and utility guys are helpful. And at worst, he's going to rove around, as you mentioned, play different positions, hit a little bit, be around for a while. That's what you hope. But I think it's good context to know this trade's not made. Position players report next week for the Diamondbacks. where is Blaze Alexander seen on this roster? Is he making the team? Is he a starter? Is he a bench guy? Where would he have been? I think that gives better context for, what O's fans should expect going into 2026.
Great question. So really what it was Blaze Alexander at the start of the offseason. It was looking like Blaze Alexander and Jordan Lawler, who was the Diamondbacks' #1 prospect for the last handful of years. Both of them are kind of competing for the same role. And before we signed Nolan Arenado, it was looking like they would be our utility, or they would be switching off between each other playing third. Both are young players. Both are growing incredibly, and it was going to be a matter of, which of them is going to be our guy. Then we signed Nolan Arenado, and then now things kind of felt a little bit cramped. It was like, okay, well, we have him playing third, and now Lawler and Alexander are going to be kind of switching between outfield, short, maybe third sometimes, maybe DH sometimes. It kind of felt a little tight. And so up until this trade happened, it was kind of up in the air of what was Jordan Lawler's position going to look like. And Jordan Lawler, at least personally, and a lot of other fans in Arizona agree, is that he kind of has the higher ceiling. And he struggled a bit more in the start of last season and then started to improve as the season went, whereas Alexander did great in the beginning of his time in the majors and then started to dip towards the end. And so it's my opinion that Lawler, I want to see Lawler out there getting reps more than I wanted Alexander out there getting reps. And so, but it wasn't because I thought Alexander wasn't good. It was a tough decision. You're picking between two kids kind of thing, two of your kids. And so it was, I think this was a move that made a lot of sense. And if Baltimore, and I'm not super familiar with Baltimore, and I actually love to hear from you after the break, but about how you think he's going to fit into into the Orioles organization and everything, because here in Arizona, I think he was going to have a lot of opportunities, but it was going to be cut short because of that competition.
Yeah, it seems like the Diamondbacks definitely traded from a strength to bolster a weakness a little bit. And that's what we'll get to coming up next. 3 players Arizona got back in this deal. Maybe a little scouting report from me to help out the D-backs fans out there. What should you expect from Kade Strowd and the 2 prospects coming over to the Snakes in this O's and D-backs trade? But first, this crossover episode is brought to you by Indeed, because hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed-sponsored jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. Daynen already mentioned Locked On was looking for a new Locked On Diamondbacks host during the offseason. Of course, they're looking for someone who's a D-backs fan, who knows D-backs baseball, and has a nice looking setup that they can show you on YouTube as well. And I'm sure those are the exact skills they would have put in somewhere like Indeed to eventually come up with the hire of Daynen Biggs. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. It is a MLB crossover episode. Connor Newcomb here of Locked On Orioles. Daynen Biggs of Locked On Diamondbacks. Daynen, the D-backs ended up trading away a player in Blaze Alexander, who, as you said, was going to be important, but maybe not an everyday starter, so maybe a bit expendable. And they got 2 arms and a position player prospect, and specifically 1 arm in Kade Strowd, who's going to help a bullpen that, I mean, the D-backs made a cool run at the end of last year where they maybe got close to the playoffs, but that bullpen they had at the end of the season, it was at times, for me as an outsider, unreal that collection of players was a major league bullpen that was in a playoff race. So they probably needed some help with those arms. So what is it that Diamondbacks fans kind of would want to know about Kade Strowd, and then even too about the two prospects coming over to Arizona in the deal?
Yeah, so let's start with Stroud. So now he only played 25 games, I believe it was, this season, and has been a top prospect as a top prospect as of this year, right? Was he the number one, or how high on the prospect list was he in?
So Stroud was interesting because he was a better known prospect early on. He kind of fell off, and then the Orioles, he never made it back onto prospect lists at near the end of his time as a prospect before he debuted in 2025. But the Orioles did last offseason add him to the 40-man roster to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. He was kind of a surprise addition. Like, he had a okay at best year as a reliever in AAA. He was already in his late 20s, and people thought, hey, maybe they would protect this guy, but nobody was like, oh yeah, they're going to give this guy a 40-man spot. And they kind of surprisingly did. So the Orioles tipped their hand a little bit to be like, they like this guy a lot better than we thought. And it turned out that, yeah, they did like him because they gave him, 20 plus innings last season as well.
So when you would see Cade come out and pitching, it was towards the end of the season. What was because you have pitchers who come out and you go, oh boy, here we go. And then you have pitchers who come out and you're like, all right, this guy knows what he's doing. He's got control of the situation. Kind of on that spectrum of confident to not confident. How would you feel when Stroud would come out for the Orioles?
Yeah, I mean, I'd call myself a 5 on the 1 to 10 of how confident I was when he pitched. He was such an intriguing arm this year. So you look at just the surface level stats for Kade Strowd, a 1.71 ERA in 26 and a third innings in his MLB debut. You're like, yes, please, more of that. That is an incredible debut. And on the surface, suppressing runs, that is a fantastic debut to have an ERA under 2. It's not like he pitched in 2 games. He pitched in 25 games. It is hard to keep your ERA that low as a reliever pitching in 25 games. Now, his FIP was 3.40. There was some good luck in there. He had some good batted ball luck, and he certainly walked some guys. A 12% walk rate isn't fantastic. He ran some pretty high walk rates in the minors. That's why it took him until 27, 28 to debut. The stuff was always there. The command really was not, even when he went into the bullpen. But the Orioles, you may have traded away 4 relievers at last year's deadline. Their closer, Felix Bautista, got injured. So after the deadline, they had 5 open bullpen spots that weren't there previously. That's why Strowd and many, many others got chances in the final 2 months of the season. And Strowd took advantage of that chance almost better than anyone else. The reason why I kind of honestly crashed out a little bit when I saw this trade happen was because the Orioles bullpen is still a weakness. It's, they found some guys last season, but it's a team that's trying to get back to the postseason in 2026. And you look at the names in their pen beyond Ryan Helsley, and it's a lot of question marks. And for a guy with that good of stuff, it's like unbelievably good raw stuff. Does he know where it's going all the time? Probably not. But you look at the stuff plus numbers on FanGraphs, and the breaking balls have absurd numbers. The fastball has good velocity. He throws a cutter. It's almost like Kenley Jansen-esque, the amount of cutters he actually throws. Not saying the pitch is as good as Kenley's, but the usage is up there.
Yeah.
It's an intriguing mix you don't see from anyone else. It's stuff numbers. And again, it's a 1.7 ERA the last time you saw him. So you're excited for Kade Strowd to absolutely be a part of this opening day bullpen. And so he gets traded, and you're like, the Orioles are trading away from a weakness, their pitching, to add to what theoretically is a strength. The offense, after adding Pete Alonso and Taylor Ward, is the best part of this Orioles team right now. So that was the really confusing part. What I found really intriguing when kind of researching my episode initially after the trade was that the Orioles didn't have a closer down the stretch last year. They were out of it. They were way under 500. It's one of those things where you trade 5 relievers away. You're just trying to claim guys on waivers, bring up rookies, and see what sticks. So everybody's getting a chance. I think like 6 different guys got a chance to get a save down the stretch last year. The O's just throwing guys in there. Who's going to step up to be in our bullpen next year? And weirdly enough, Strowd was not one of the guys who got one of those chances. You'd think, okay, with prospect in your system, 1.71 ERA, great stuff. Wouldn't he get that chance? And he never did. I looked up the leverage index from FanGraphs, basically saying like, how high leverage are you coming into games every time you go out there? And after the trade deadline, when Strowd was an everyday part of the bullpen, he was, I think, 6th in leverage index in that bullpen. I mean, that's that's a borderline mop-up guy in terms of how you're being used. He wasn't exactly a mop-up guy. He got a couple of high leverage outings, but nothing close to what, journeyman 35-year-old Dietrich Enns and journeyman 31-year-old Rico Garcia got way more high leverage spots than Strowd. So I love Kade Strowd. I think the stuff is awesome. If he can corral the command, he's going to be a legitimate high leverage reliever. But I found it so intriguing that the Orioles, with nothing to play for and all these openings in these big spots, never used Kade Strowd in any of them. And that opened up a little for me, like, maybe they think this 1.71 ERA is a ruse and they really don't trust this guy. And that's why they were willing to trade him away. I still think he's good, but it almost makes me think like maybe the Orioles are not as high on this guy as I personally am.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's, I mean, for us, for you and I, that's pretty much just a time will tell sort of thing. Which the Diamondbacks did bring on a new assistant GM this offseason. That's something Mike Hazen, the GM of the Diamondbacks, has been criticized, rightfully so, for the bullpen pitching kind of being the lower priority for the team. He's kind of always prioritized hitting and offense and then defense as well to a certain extent. And so this offseason he brought on the I'm trying to think of his name right now, but the former director of pitching development from the Pirates, who have a fantastic pitching prospects, and he's partially responsible for Paul Skeens and other people like that, and so brought him on to help identify those pitchers that they like, and so we're hopeful that he had a heavy hand in that and said, yes, Kade Strowd, let's get him by whatever means necessary. I don't know if that's the case, but I would sure like to think so. But I am wondering, and maybe this is something you want to get to at some other point, but where do you feel like Blaze Alexander is a good trade-off for Kade Strowd? Do you feel like this is something that makes sense to you, or do you feel like maybe this was a bad move by the Orioles?
Yeah, I mean, if the Orioles are healthy, Blaze Alexander is their utility man, right? He will play some third, he will play some second. He can, as you talked about, sounds like he can move into the outfield and play a little bit out there. He will bounce around. Jordan Westberg, their third baseman, has had some serious injury issues the past 2 years. He's not playing 162. The Orioles have Tyler O'Neill, who played in just 54 games last year and is injured all the time in the corner outfield. I'm sure he'll need somebody else to be out there at times. And candidly, Jackson Holliday, who was the former number one prospect in baseball, still has not shown a great proclivity to hit left-handed pitching. And I know that's something Blaze Alexander can do. So maybe spelling Jackson Holliday at second base a little bit will be some time to play. I just still think that there's got to be some sort of injury or something else in the works for the Orioles to, it's not like they gave up an incredible amount, but they gave up a good amount to get a utility player. So I have to think the O's feel like they need to cover for somebody for a month or two at the beginning of the season because of an injury. If that ends up being the case, this trade actually makes a lot more sense for the O's because they did need a utility guy. Like Ramon Arias and Jorge Mateo filled that role for the last 5 years. Both are now gone. Jeremiah Jackson did it for them last year. He was pretty solid, but he was a rookie and he had been released by 2 other teams in the minor league. So he may have just kind of had a Jeremy Lin type run for 2 months last year. And that may have been that. And I think they wanted a more sure thing probably in a guy like Alexander to fill that utility role. But it'll be intriguing to see, once we kind of get into full squad workouts next week in spring training and how things are going to play out and what the roster looks like. I did want to give just a little spiel for the 2 prospects because that was the other part of this deal. I think it first came across Blaze Alexander, the Orioles. I'm like, okay, the O's need a utility guy. That makes kind of sense. Then it's like Kade Stroud's going back the other way. And I have my mini crash out because I love Kade Strowd. And then it's like, oh, the Orioles are adding 2 more prospects. And I'm like, Kade Strowd wasn't enough to get a utility guy. You had to give up 2 prospects. Now, the infielder, Jose Mejia, he's not really any kind of ranked prospect in the system. He had a really good year in rookie ball, but he's 20 years old in rookie ball. If it works out, I mean, great. Yeah, he's a lottery ticket. If it works out, great for the Diamondbacks. He's had some good stats in the low minors, but I don't think you're banking much on him. Wellington Aracena is probably the one that made Orioles fans in general crash out the most. Aracena came over from the Mets in the Gregory Soto trade at the 2025 deadline. He was a pitcher who ended the year in high A with 5 like incredible starts, sub-3 ERA in high A. He's got this almost like invisible exploding cut ride fastball that no hitter in the low minor leagues could touch this thing up in the zone. Now, when he gets to AA and AAA, we'll see if that continues. But in the low minor leagues, it was almost unhittable. There's questions about his command. He really struggled when he would get anywhere past 3 or 4 innings. His body would almost break down start to start. So I think there's also a lot of like concern that he'll just be a reliever moving forward because he hasn't shown the ability to pitch anywhere close to deep into games while he's still young and fairly healthy. So that is maybe why you're more willing to trade him, because you think he's a reliever long term. But I think Wellington Arcena is going to be a legit reliever. Now, it's going to take a couple of years before he's big league ready. I mean, 2028 at the earliest, maybe later before he's a big leaguer, but he's going to be a legit pitching prospect. I mean, the Orioles have a pretty solid system. Fangraphs had Arcena ranked 14th in the Orioles system in terms of prospects. Like for a pitcher, that's pretty good that you're giving up on. Now, again, he's in the low minors and he wouldn't be helping the Orioles this year like Kade Strowd would have been. But I think that was the other part that I think D-backs fans should be almost as excited about. Kade Stroud's more exciting because he helps you this year. But Arcena's ceiling is much higher than anything Kade Strowd can give you, especially if he can stay as a starter with the stuff that he currently has.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's one that I've been excited about, even though I couldn't quite pronounce his last name. I've had a hard time reading that. But about him, we're super stoked. Mejia, the fact that at the level that he's at, he's able to get on base as often as he does is very promising, but also, again, he's an infielder, 20 years old, and very early on still. Not much is promised there, but definitely a nice little thing to add.
So we'll each give our pitch for who we think won this trade coming up next to finish off this crossover episode. But first, this MLB crossover episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are officially here. And if you're anything like us, I'm sure you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. I was completely locked in to mixed doubles curling on Tuesday, and I was genuinely upset when the U.S. lost the gold medal on the final throw. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Even these niche events, they become must-watch, just like curling, when you're fully locked in. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. Again, that is FanDuel. Play your game. Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles, Daynen Biggs of Locked On Diamondbacks here with you for a crossover episode. Daynen, I'll throw it to you first. We've kind of talked about both sides of this deal, Kade Strowd and 2 prospects for Blaze Alexander. Do you have a strong feeling or an argument either way? It was funny to see the fan reaction initially at the trade. It was like both fan bases were upset. That usually means it's a pretty even trade. So who do you think won this trade at this point?
All right. So if I had to pick between the Orioles and the Diamondbacks, who won the trade, I mean, I got to say, I hate to see Alexander go. I think he's going to do great things in Baltimore, but I do think the Diamondbacks probably win this trade, just considering the fact that it's not like the Orioles have their bullpen completely like locked down. If they did, I'd say then, we're probably fine, or that the Orioles probably come away with more than they gave, but the Diamondbacks needed help in the bullpen. They didn't need extra utility guys, which they already have. And so I definitely think the Diamondbacks are coming out of this better than they went into it. I think the Orioles may be as well, but I don't know that. I think maybe not quite as well as the Diamondbacks.
I'm going to agree with you.
Okay. I was going to say,
I think the Diamondbacks win the trade. I don't think it's like a massive win one way or the other, because it is in the big picture, it's a smaller scale trade. But
yeah,
I talked about this in my episode last week when I broke down the trade. I used the like robbing Peter to pay Paul analogy as kind of what the Orioles did. They took away from a bullpen that had some questions to get a utility player. And again, if there is an injury in the Orioles infield, I think it skews a little bit more towards the O's, because it's something they needed more than, as far as we know, they need right now, with a full infield of, Jordan Westburg at third, Gunnar Henderson at short, and Jackson Holiday at second base. They needed a utility guy, but there's plenty of guys you can just kind of go out and get. You could re-sign Ramon Arias. He's been your utility guy for 5 years, and he's still a free agent. I think, and the reason I talked about, robbing Peter to pay Paul, what I talked about was like, Paul didn't need your money. Paul didn't want your money. Paul was rich already. Like the Orioles offense is projected to be top 5 in baseball. The Diamondbacks, on the other hand, they traded away from a surplus. They have a Jordan Lawler who they think is better and probably is better. He was a much better prospect coming up for a bullpen that they desperately needed to get better, especially after losing Andrew Saalfrank as well. So I talked about it. I was like, if this would have been a 180 flipped trade where the Orioles traded away a hitter for a relief pitcher with good metrics, I would have been like, awesome job. And that's exactly what the Diamondbacks needed to do, and they did it. It's weird that these two teams matched up on this trade because these two teams are kind of built pretty similarly right now. Yeah. Good offense, some good names in the rotation, but questions there, and then definitely questions in the bullpen because of injuries and other things. And that makes them weird trade partners to do a pitcher for hitter deal. But that's what they did, and here we are. And so we'll see what the fallout looks like. I'm pretty convinced both Strowd and Alexander will play big roles for each of their teams in 2026, and hopefully they both play well, and it kind of works out as a good trade. Daynen, this was awesome. Great crossover episode. I know the people of Locked On Diamondbacks know where to find you, but let the Orioles fans tuning in know where to find you on platforms, and if they want even more Locked On Diamondbacks, how they can check out the Everydayer Club for your show as well.
Well, it's not hard to find. You just go on any social media platform, look up at Locked On Diamondbacks, and you'll find us. Everydayer Club, Locked On Diamondbacks. I don't have the there you go. And you'll find what we got there, and it's good, fun stuff. And if you're very interested in, we'll almost certainly be talking a lot about Kade Strowd going forward and into spring training in the regular season. So if you want to follow his status, you can always go there. But yeah, and then same for you.
Yeah, I imagine fans, if you want to continue to follow the Blaze Alexander journey, Locked On Orioles on socials, on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are interested in the Everydayer Club, you can get ad-free episodes of either of these shows. You can get access to a Discord channel, talk about one of these shows with fans and us hosts ourselves. You can check out lockedonorioles.supercast.com to see all the offerings that we have over there. That'll do it for a crossover episode here at Locked On MLB. Daynen Biggs of Locked On Diamondbacks and Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles. We'll see you both on our respective shows coming up tomorrow as we are back into spring training, back into 5 episodes per week, and baseball is right around the corner.